Do 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 do. You know, my channel has been doing a little too well this year. The first video I uploaded this year brought in thousands of views and over 150 new subscribers, and that's amazing. But your girl's in the mood for a little bit of self-sabotage, so I figured I would make a video that maybe 3 people maximum would watch. So despite the not 1, not 2, but 3 videos that I have made on Cats the Musical, believe it or not, it is actually not my favorite Andrew Lloyd Webber musical. My favorite musical of Webber or of anyone is The Phantom of the Opera. You know, I just really love, like, underground, unknown, off Broadway productions. I got into Phantom when I was 13, which is the prime age to get into Phantom of the Opera. Like a lot of people, my introduction to it was the Joel Schumacher 2004 film, which did a number on my sexuality. The Point of No Return, as performed by Gerard Butler and Emmy Rossum, was formative to me, to say the least. And when I really love something, I express this love through reading and writing fanfiction. And when it comes to Phantom, the type of fanfiction that I like to read the most, aside from the odd, like, smutty one-shot, is novel-length alternate universe fics. Because the thing is, there's not a whole lot to the original story of Phantom. As written in the original novel Le Fantôme de l'Opéra by Gaston Leroux, there's a young woman named Christine. She's a soprano at the Garnier Opera House, or the Opera Populaire as told in the Webber musical, and she's being taught by someone who she thinks is the angel of music, who she believes that her late father sent to her when he died, but it's actually this guy, the Phantom of the Opera, or the Opera Ghost. He lives underneath the Opera House and just wreaks all kind of havoc. He has to live under the Opera House because he has these facial differences, which in, like, 19th century Paris means that he basically cannot be a functioning member of society. The Phantom is called Eric in the novel, but he doesn't have a name in the musical because I think they're trying to, like, maintain his mystique, but in the novel, Leroux was very much trying to, like, humanize the character and give him an identity. And he's in love with Christine, so he is not super jazzed when Christine reunites with her childhood best friend Raoul, and they get engaged. The Phantom kidnaps Christine, he murders a few people, oopsie poopsie. Raoul comes to rescue her, the Phantom threatens to kill Raoul if Christine doesn't agree to marry him, and Christine's like, okay fine, I'll marry you, and Eric's like, ha, psych, you can leave. And that's basically the whole story, aside from a few zany madcap hijinks here and there. So again, because it's a very simple, short plot, it's a very short book, I like it when a fanfic author, like, you know, plays around with alternate universes. And a big thing about me is I am a Christine and Eric shipper. Now I want to make something very clear. Just as it is true that you can, like, read about a certain ship or a certain subject matter and not necessarily support that thing in real life, I think that I can read fanfiction about something and not tolerate it in traditional fiction. I will read all kinds of fanfiction about Christine and Eric. I do not think that they should have gotten together canonically. And boy oh boy does Love Never Dies prove that. You know, in the musical, after the Phantom kidnaps Christine, she's like, hey, just out of curiosity, are you gonna, like, sexually assault me? And Eric's like, I've had a really hard life. And Christine's like, that is not an answer to the question that I asked. So yes, fanfiction-wise, I ship it. Canonically, I do not ship it. Now there is one fanfic author in particular whose work that I absolutely love, and that is Phantom Fan 33, otherwise known as Anne Maggard, as she did self-publish these books. And hers were the first works that I read when I first got into the fandom, not to be confused with the fandom. So today, we're just gonna be recapping all of her Phantom of the Opera fanfiction. Now this video is for people who enjoy Phantom of the Opera fanfiction and like the sound of my voice. It's for me. This video is for me. So there are technically 7 works under Phantom Fan 33. One of them is like a one-shot about Meg. I'm not going to talk about that one. I, like, skimmed it for completionist's sake. But there are 6 Christine and Eric fanfics, and they are Siren of the Sea, Mystery Behind the Mask, Angel of Persia, Phantom's Proposal, Seeing is Believing, and Phantom Triumphant. I listed them from favorite to least favorite. Oh ho ho. The one I'm not going to talk about is Phantom Triumphant because it's a retelling. I don't really like retellings. It does diverge from the original plot in a lot of ways, but ultimately it just doesn't interest me that much. It's also like a retelling of the musical, which is odd, and a glaring issue with that, for me at least, is that Nadir is not in it, because Nadir is not in the Weber musical. Nadir is not in most adaptations. In the original Le Fantôme de l'Opéra, there is a character called the Persian. He is indeed Persian. It sounds bad, but hear me out. The original novel is written journalistically as if these events actually took place, and Gaston Leroux is investigating them. So the Persian is an anonymous source whose identity Gaston Leroux, the journalist, wants to protect. And probably the best known, most popular, one of the first Phantom of the Opera fanfics is Phantom by Susan Kay. And it goes into like Eric's backstory, particularly his time in Persia, which that is canonical to the original story. That's how he and the Persian met. And she gives the name Nadir Khan to the Persian, so colloquially within the fandom, within the fanfiction realm, that is what most authors tend to call him. Phantom Fan 33 uses Nadir in some of her fics, but in the 3 that she published, which are Mystery Behind the Mask, Siren of the Sea, and I should know this off the top of my head, Seeing is Believing. She uses the name Amir Dasan because even though the Persian is not a copyrighted character, the name Nadir Khan is. But I'm just gonna call him Nadir regardless of which specific fanfic I'm talking about. And Nadir's like the best character in all of these. He provides a lot of comic relief, he's usually like Eric's bestie, and functionally he's usually one of the first things that causes Christine to warm up to Eric, because he's, you know, he cuts a very intimidating figure, but then Christine sees that Nadir and Eric are like best friends, and Nadir's great, so she's like, oh, Eric must not be that bad if Nadir is willing to be friends with him. But he's not in Phantom Triumphant, and there is very much a Nadir-shaped hole in that fanfic, sadly. But it's fine, because the other ones are so great. Well, some of them are. I have thoughts on a couple others. We're going to start off with the first of Phantom Fan 33's fanfics that I read, which is The Siren of the Sea. Ugh, I love a cross-dressing story. This one takes place in England in the 1700s. Christine and her father are commoners in the English countryside. However, Christine's father is friends with a nobleman named Lord Collingsworth. I don't remember his first name, but he's important. Lord Collingsworth is a widower with 2 children, Philippe and Meg, and Charles, Christine's father, and Collingsworth always wanted for Philippe and Christine to get married so that their families can be legally united. However, Christine and Philippe, while good friends, there's no chemistry between them, there's nothing romantic there, so they're like, I don't really want to get married. But Christine is on a voyage to visit the Collingsworth estate. Ultimately, she's going to break it to Collingsworth that she's like, hey, not really gonna marry your son anytime soon. But on that voyage, the ship is overtaken by a pirate ship called the Damnation. And this guy, Commodore Edwards, who's like Christine's chaperone on this trip because her father's not with her, comes up to Christine with some cloth and a cap, and he's like, hey, hide your hair and bind your chest, because if we lose this battle, the pirates cannot find out that you're a woman. It will not end well for you. So the Damnation does in fact win the battle, and most of the crew and the passengers on the ship that Christine is on are sold into slavery. However, the captain of the Damnation takes Christine in particular. She now goes by Chris. She's in her disguise. Because he wants her to be his, like, cabin boy. And so now Christine is aboard the Damnation, but she's not there for too long before the Damnation is overtaken by the Phantom, Eric's ship. So the Phantom vanquishes the Damnation. They find Christine aboard the ship, who is still masquerading as a boy, and she joins the Phantom for the time being because she makes it very clear, hey, I'm not one of them, I'm not your enemy, I'm just a normal guy and I want to reunite with my father. And Eric does not want to help her, but Nadir, his first mate, persuades him to do so. So now we're aboard the Phantom. As with the rest of these fics, I'm not gonna do like a thorough step-by-step plot breakdown. I'm just gonna kind of go through my favorite and least favorite moments, of which there are several in either direction. So Christine makes herself pretty indispensable to the crew of the Phantom, to the point that you're like, how did this ship ever survive without her? Nobody aboard the Phantom can cook all that well, so she teaches the designated cook how to make like an actual good meal for everybody. One of the first things that she does is save a man from blood poisoning, the man and his leg, because they were going to chop it off. But her father is a physician, and she's helped him out with a lot of things, including blood poisoning cases, so she knew how to treat it, and she saved the man's life and his leg. And that's kind of a really cool moment, because it immediately earns respect for Christine and admiration from the rest of the crew, and they finally kind of accept her as one of their own, because she understandably was an outsider the first few days that she was aboard. There's another cute moment where Eric buys Christine a book on like botany and herbology so that she can like study herbs that can help with medicine and stuff. That same day he also buys her a Lady of the Evening at a brothel, but no need to talk about that. But he buys her this book, and the next day she's reading it on the ship, and she notices one of the other crew members like reading it over her shoulder, and she's like, oh, here, please, if you want to read it, go ahead. And he's like, actually, I'm just looking at the pictures. I don't know how to read. Most of us don't. Why don't you read it aloud? And she's like, well, it's a textbook. Like, it's not very interesting. So she decides to go to Eric and borrow his copy of the Iliad, I think it is. And she makes it her nightly routine to read to the crew every night. She also speaks French. The one time the Phantom really does any sort of pirating, they overtake a French naval ship where they meet Captain Raoul Dubois, not Duchesne in this fic, weirdly. But Christine has to translate for everybody. There comes a point where it's like fall, September-ish, and Eric is in a foul mood, and he is making it everybody else's problem, because what else is a man good for? Christine asks Nadir about it, and he's like, yeah, he just kind of gets this way around this time of year. It's best to just avoid him. And Christine's like, well, why is that? Like, what's the reason? And Nadir says, nobody knows. And Christine goes, well, has anybody asked him? And Nadir goes, no, we are not gossiping washerwomen. We're men. If he wants to tell us something, then he'll tell us. Christine's like, yes, that would be your entire gender's plight. So Eric's really drunk and belligerent, and Christine's like, hey, if you need to talk about anything, I'm right here. And Eric divulges his tragic backstory. Basically, he was illegitimate and raised by a single mother. He and his mother were commoners, but he was sired by, like, a nobleman who his mother fell in love with, but they couldn't get married because of the class differences. His father went on to marry a noblewoman and have some children with her, and then Eric's mother died when Eric was around 14, I want to say. And Eric was enraged and embittered by the fact that his father never acknowledged him or his mother, so he's like, vengeance will be mine. He talks about how he went to his father's estate and hid in the garden with a knife, and he saw his father and was ready to kill him, but he also saw his father's 2 children with him, and he was like, I can't do that to them. I grew up without a father. I don't want them to suffer the same fate. But then he reveals the one keepsake that he has from his father, which is like a locket or a watch or something, and it is engraved with Lord Collingsworth's name. T. And Christine's like, oh my fucking god, I nearly married this guy's half-brother. It's a small world after all. One thing that's different about this fanfic from Phantom Fan 33's other works is that because Eric doesn't know that Christine is a girl for a lot of it, he doesn't fall in love with her at first sight, so she's the one who immediately kind of starts crushing on him, which, you know, is somewhat refreshing, I guess, but I do really just love when he simps for her from the very beginning. But, you know, he gets to love her for, like, the person that she is rather than her appearance and her feminine physique, whatever. And of course, another one of my favorite moments in this one is the reveal, obviously. So Eric, of course, finds out that Christine is a girl, but he keeps it to himself for a few days. The Phantom experiences a storm, and Christine almost gets swept off of the side of the ship into the ocean, and he's like, oh my god, yo-ho, a pirate's life is not for her. So then he tries to send her away like a bitch, but then the next day, he walks back on that, and he reveals that he knows she's a woman, and also he asks her to marry him, and they get married. But, like, how it happens is they're having this confrontation in his office, and he, like, starts advancing towards her, and she backs up against the wall. It's a little toxic, but it's also a little bit hot, so it's okay. And she's, like, back up against the wall, and he reaches for her hat, and her hair falls down to her shoulders, and, like, and he proposes to her in front of the crew, and she's like, yo, I'm not just marrying you because, like, you feel a need to protect me because I'm a woman or whatever. And he's like, I will protect you with every fiber of my being. However, I'm proposing because I am passionately and quite hopelessly in love with you. The good shit, right there. Now, as for my least favorite part, in every Phantom Fan 33 fanfiction, there is what I like to call the period of separation. It's when Eric and Christine, after falling in love, are separated physically for a long duration. And usually the period of separation is very, very much Eric-induced. It is usually his fault. he is usually being a little bastard. And in this one, it is after Christine and Eric get married. Nadir officiates their wedding. They have lots and lots of raucous pirate sex, and Christine falls pregnant and is immediately kidnapped by a rival pirate ship, and Eric's like, yo ho, the pirate life really ain't for her, and it ain't for that baby either. So he conspires with Christine's father, who they've finally gotten into contact with, and he's like, yo, we're getting her off of this ship. And Christine's father is like, well, I don't really like you, and I don't like her being on a pirate ship, so fine by me. So he fucking abandons her, like, without telling her. He, like, leaves her at the port or, like, on another ship and sails away with her, like, screaming his name, like, begging him not to abandon his own child like he was abandoned by his father. It is so painful. And they're separated for like 8 months, which, if you do the math on that, that is most of Christine's pregnancy. Christine is with her father in their village, depressed as fuck and also ostracized because she's pregnant, and while she is married, she's married to a pirate, and everybody knows that she was kidnapped aboard a pirate ship, and now she's pregnant, so everybody's like, oh, you had that baby out of wedlock, and it's like, she's not doing much better than she would have done on the Phantom. At one point, Raoul meets up with her and actually extends an offer of marriage to her, which we love. We love Raoul in this fic. He is such a gentleman. Like, imagine that, a French naval captain offering to marry an English commoner and, like, raise a child that isn't even his. That's more character than Eric's been showing this whole time, that's for damn sure. And Christine declines the offer because she's still holding out hope for Eric. But her other reasoning is that Raoul deserves someone who loves him and only him, and I agree with that. And then after that, Raoul meets up with Eric at one point, and he's like, just so you know, I proposed to Christine. And Eric's like, you proposed to my wife? And Raoul's like, yeah, she's awesome, she deserves better than you, and I don't know how you're calling her your wife when you abandoned her and your unborn child. I mean, I love Eric, I really do, but sometimes I love him in the way that a mother loves her rebellious teenage son. Begrudgingly. And what makes this all the worse is that, like, I maybe could have dealt with this if Eric had, like, come to his senses and, like, docked at Christine's little village, even though it's not safe for pirates to dock there, and, like, risked life and limb in order to see her again and beg for her back. But that is not what happens. Instead, Nadir goes behind Eric's back with Christine to, like, get her back aboard the ship so she and Eric can see each other again, and he can finally, like, have a come to Jesus moment where he's like, oh, I shouldn't have abandoned you. But this means that Christine has to board the ship in secret, which means that, like, she and her father are, like, on a rowboat in the middle of the night. Christine's ass, 9 months pregnant, in a rowboat! I cannot. This man does not deserve her. And I know I've been saying, like, what gets me, what infuriates me? The thing that gets me the absolute most about this is that Christine could have died or lost the baby, and if Eric had had his way, he would not have been there for her. I would never forgive a person for willingly doing this to me. I mean, they gotta stay married. Well, do they? I mean, she's married to a pirate. The wedding was officiated by a pirate, witnessed by other pirates. So, yes, they are married according to maritime law, but also, like, what are they gonna do? Testify in court? But then again, it's very unlikely that another man other than Raoul would be willing to marry, like, a woman who had a child out of wedlock, so there's that. So fine, we gotta stay married, but you are never touching me again. I hope you like the kid we got. It's the only one you'll ever have. But they reunite, and of course, like, 12 hours later, Christine goes into labor without her physician father there. So Eric's dumbass has to deliver this fucking baby. I cannot. This man is useless. However, Eric finally comes to his senses and he's like, all right, we gotta get off this ship. I have somewhat of an inheritance from my father. We're gonna go there and we're gonna get his mansion because you and our child deserve it. So all's well that ends well, but, like, I would seriously never trust this man as far as I could throw him. And I cannot throw him. But, like, really, for all the shit that I talk about Eric and his life choices, it really is a fun, swashbuckling tale. Like, I only touched, like, 10% of it. There's, like, you know, they go to an island and find treasure, and they're in all this treachery, and they do all this pirate stuff, and it's really fun. I recommend it. So my next favorite, slash, honestly, I think it's the best crafted story out of all Phantom Fan 33's works, is Mystery Behind the Mask. And I don't know if I'm gonna get too much into it because it is like a gothic mystery, and the mystery in question is actually really well done. Like, if you read it yourself, it's not impossible to tell what's going on, but like, it's so well done, and there's so much tension leading up to the climax of the story that like, I honestly don't want to spoil it, even though this is an in-depth plot spoiling of most of these fics. However, for a little bit of background, Christine is an orphan. Her only living relative is her evil uncle Max. She grew up in a convent after her parents were murdered when she was 10 years old, and now her father is pawning her off into an arranged marriage with none other than Eric. And neither of them wants to get married, but for reasons due to their domineering male relatives, they're like, alright, fine, we'll do it. Now, one thing about this fanfiction is, Christine is 17 years old, and Eric is 32. In the original Phantom of the Opera, Christine is 20, and the Phantom's age is never really specified, but it's implied he's supposed to be like old enough to be her father, so middle-aged, 40s, 50s, somewhere around there. And Phantom Fan 33 usually includes like a 15-year age gap between Christine and Eric. In Siren of the Sea, they are 19 and 34. In Angel of Persia, they are 18 and 33. In, I don't know how old they are in Seeing is Believing or Phantom Triumphant, but Phantom's Proposal, they are 23 and 38. And in this one, they are 17 and 32. Christine is also at her most, like, innocent in this fic, again, because of her age and the fact that she grew up in a convent. Also, when they first meet, for reasons, Eric thinks that Christine was spying on him, and he doesn't immediately realize that this is the woman that he's betrothed to. So he's like, oh, you were a spy sent by my father. Oh, I'll have to punish you with my body. And in the narration, he's like, oh, he was just trying to scare her. But then he does kiss her forcibly, but like, she's sort of into it, and then he's like really into it. He's like, oh, this woman has bewitched me. And it's like, she's barely a woman, but alright. And then he finds out like this is his future wife, and he's like, shit. Anyway, Christine's uncle and Eric's father suck. They're the ones who forced them into this marriage in the first place, and both of them are threatening Christine in particular, being like, hey, if you don't marry him and if you don't produce a child within the first year of your marriage, you're going to a brothel. And Eric's father threatens to, like, visit her at the brothel. Ew. So Eric finds out about this, and he is enraged, and he's like, you will never see the inside of a brothel as long as I draw breath. You are safe. You're my family now, and I protect what is mine. And that's kind of like a recurring thing over the course of the story. Like, you're mine, and I protect what's mine. And I don't find that hot. What do you mean? How dare you accuse me of such a thing? But this is like a gothic romantic mystery, so there's all these secrets that Eric is hiding from her, which in the beginning it's like, alright, you don't really know her, you can't trust her, but then it's like, they do fall in love at one point. It's like, you two are married for life, and she really should know these things, and she does assume the worst when she sees all this evidence and draws the wrong conclusions, and but it is so good. It hits. This fic hits. It really is the best. It's just so hard for me to look past the fact that Christine is 17. Oh my god, there's this one point where, in this story, Meg and Madame Giry are, like, servants at the estate where Christine and Eric live. Meg has this little romance with this guy, Peter, and at one point she's talking to Christine, who, at this point, Eric and Christine are, like, in love and have made love and all of that. Sometimes I'm kissing Peter and I don't want it to stop, and Christine's like, well, that's perfectly natural to feel. However, you can't pursue those feelings until after you're married. Like, you can kiss, but that's it. Because, you know, it was back in the day, so obviously they have things about that. So, you know, that's true and all, but also, you know, Christine, 17-year-old little baby Christine, is counseling, like, I don't know how old she is, like 22-year-old Meg on this stuff. And it's like, you know, you're not like the wise, learned woman that you think you are, Christine. There is a point where Christine is considering leaving because she thinks that Eric is having an affair. He's not. Eric is a lot of things, but disloyal is not one of them. That man is a loyal hoe, but she thinks that he has a mistress, so she's gonna run away, but before that can happen, there's plot things that interrupt it. And then Christine and Eric finally have a heart-to-heart, and she confesses to him, like, yeah, I was gonna leave you, and he's like, the hell you say? He says that, the hell you say? And then the narration, it's like, Christine leaving? Was the room getting smaller? Ugh. simp. But anyway, there is this huge thing with, like, this secret woman and the murder of Christine's parents and all of this stuff. Like, it's so good. Like, the overarching mystery is so good. So go read it, even if you don't care about Phantom and don't feel like reading a novel-length Phantom of the Opera alternate universe gothic romance fic. I don't care, go read it. The next one that we're getting into is The Angel of Persia. Now, these are my 3 favorites. When I say, like, oh, I listed it favorite to least favorite, there's my top 3, and then the other 3 I don't like quite as much. And for a long time, Siren of the Sea, Mystery Behind the Mask, and Angel of Persia were all just kind of shuffling in my top 3 because I couldn't decide which one was my favorite. Angel of Persia is pretty solidly my 3rd favorite. I do love it, but having read it 20 times and having reread it in my adulthood, it does have some glaring problems. So this is a fan fiction in which it takes place kind of in Eric's backstory. So he is in Persia and he is working as an architect for the Shah. He was formerly an assassin for the Shah, but you know, that's a story for another day. And the Shah has Christine kidnapped and trafficked over to Persia to present to Eric as a concubine. Now, Eric does not take advantage of the situation. I think this is like kind of a trope or setup in the Phantom. I've read at least another Phantom fanfiction in which this is kind of the setup. And that fic, oh my god. Okay, pausing on Angel of Persia. A Rose Among Thorns by Multicolored Rose Petals. Oh my fucking god. That fic, I will say, blows all of Phantom Fan 33's works out of the water. It is so dark and harrowing and tense. Like, I was biting my nails the entire time that I was reading it. I would love to do a video on Multicolored Rose Petals works, but like, I don't know if I can reread A Rose Among Thorns in the near future. Like, it's been a couple years since I read it and I still don't think I'm ready to reread it because it is so intense. It also features, hands down, the best love confession I have ever read in my life, like in any book or fanfiction or anything. Christine says to Eric, "I love you and I don't care if you don't believe me. I don't care if my feelings are unrequited. I just can't stand the thought of you going one more minute thinking that nobody loves you." Perfect. Best love confession I've ever read, and it's in a fucking fanfiction! Anyway, back to Angel of Persia. So Christine is presented to Eric as a sex slave, and he speaks to her in French, I believe. The Shah speaks English and Persian. Eric also speaks both languages, but he speaks to Christine in French so that nobody else can tell what they're saying. And he's like, yo, your options are be my concubine, be the Shah's concubine, or die, basically. And he's kind of pressed for time because he's like, the Shah's not gonna want me speaking a language that he doesn't understand for a whole long time, so I better wrap this up. But he doesn't even mention to Christine, like, hey, I did not ask for you to be here, I don't plan on taking advantage of the situation. The Shah is definitely gonna take advantage of the situation, so like, your best bet is with me. Which, does she have any reason to believe him if he says that? No. But like, if your options are guy who says he won't assault you, guy who says he definitely will assault you, and death, you kinda gotta go with the first option. But Christine does choose to stay with Eric, and they go back to his like apartment in the Shah's palace. And so the thing about Eric in this fic is this is when he's at like maybe his most mentally unstable that I've seen him in a work by Phantom Fan 33. I think part of why I like Siren of the Sea and Mystery Behind the Mask so much is because Eric is at his most sane, I would say. And part of this is due to, even though he has like a tragic backstory, he, in both of those fics, he grew up with a very, like, loving and kind mother, which makes a hell of a difference, apparently. Whereas Angel of Persia is a little more true to his, like, original LaRue backstory, and even his Kay backstory, which means he has quite a temper. And this means that he is kind of, like, constantly yelling at Christine for no fault of her own. And you know, I'm reading this, I'm not watching it play out in front of me, but mentally I do not enjoy the optics of this grown 33-year-old man yelling at this tiny 18-year-old girl. They get back to his apartment and he immediately starts throwing a tantrum and starts chucking furniture around the room because he's like, I can't believe the Shah did this, blah blah blah. Meanwhile, Christine is like cowering in the corner in this, like, slave Leia outfit. It is so rough. He's like, I'm so sorry I lost my temper. Here, let me help you. And then he sees, like, these marks on her wrists because she was in chains, and he's like, you foolish girl, you shouldn't have been trying to get out of your chains so much. And she's like, what the fuck do you want from me? However, all of this being said, I will say, Eric is probably the biggest simp in this fic out of all of them. And that's saying a lot. That boy can simp to high heaven. Because Christine only has this sex slave outfit, Eric lends her some pajamas for her first night there, and he goes to, like, cut off the wrists and the ankles of the pajamas so that they'll fit her better because they're way too big on her, and she's like, aren't you gonna want them, like, after I've stopped using them? And he, like, short circuits at the idea of wearing the pajamas after she's worn them. And he's just like, no, I will not. Angel of Persia also features, hands down, the best dialogue exchange out of any Phantom Fan 33 fic. So at one point, Eric finds out that Christine can sing, and he's giving her a voice lesson, and he's talking about when they get out of Persia. And he's like, I will build you an opera house in Paris, and you will be the leading prima donna. You will have all the world bowing at your feet. And Christine says, well, everybody but you, because you bow to no one, which this is a thing. He refuses to bow to the Shah, like, ever, because he doesn't respect him. And Eric says, Christine, I will not only bow, but grovel at your feet as well. I shall always be your humble and willing servant. Put that shit in my veins. That's the good shit. Oh, that's like, I sent a screenshot of that to my sister, and she was like, we love a man who knows his place. However, the glaring issue that I mentioned before, we're gonna address it now. There's, like, a lot of references in Angel of Persia to the country of Persia being, like, barbaric. It's referred to as barbaric at multiple points. There's, like, the harems and the blood sport and all of this, and again, it's something I didn't notice when I was 14 reading this for the first time, but I certainly notice it now. And, you know, that's a thing in A Rose Among Thorns as well, but, well, for one thing, it's a lot darker. It's, like, more violent and gruesome in A Rose Among Thorns, but all of that is kind of attributed just to the Shah himself and his mother, because, you know, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. But in A Rose Among Thorns, it's very clear that all of this can be attributed to one man rather than, like, an entire culture, and there's multiple sympathetic, complex Persian characters in A Rose Among Thorns who are actively conspiring against the Shah, including the Shah's own brother. There's a lot of discourse surrounding Persia in Angel of Persia that I am uncomfortable with, and I think did not quite need to be there in the capacity that it was. So just be warned, if you read the fic, it is very good, but it does have that. Similarly, in Siren of the Sea, when they go to that island looking for treasure, it is an island inhabited by indigenous cannibals. Yeah, I mean, it produces conflict because Eric ends up getting attacked, but the portrayal of certain groups is not my favorite. Alright, but other favorite moments in Angel of Persia. For one thing, their first kiss. So Christine goes to Eric one night, and she's like, Eric, I need to ask you for something. And in the narration, it's like, he hoped it wasn't anything more intimidating than a glass of water, but he feared that was not the case. That was just funny, and I felt like mentioning it. But she's like, Eric, I know you don't want me to see your face, but may I please feel it? It's nighttime. When I blow out this candle, this room will be as dark as a tomb. May I feel your face? And he's like, okay, I guess. So she feels his face. She feels, like, his facial differences and stuff. And then afterwards, she lets him touch her face. And he's like, oh my fucking god, I can't believe I get to touch those cheekbones. So he's, like, touching her face as well. And at one point, he, like, brushes his fingers over her lips. And he's like, Christine, may I touch your lips? And she's like, you just did, but sure, you don't have to ask permission. I gave you access to my whole face. And he's like, no, may I touch your lips with mine? He sees it because he has good night vision, but he also just, like, feels her smile. And she says, yes, Eric, I grant you permission to kiss me. And then they make out. And it's so hot. And a palace in the distance explodes. This is the palace that Eric is working on for the Shah. So he's like, my palace. And then he runs out. And the next day, Christine wants to talk to Eric about them furiously and passionately making out on the floor of their bedroom. And Eric's refusing to talk to her about it because he's not a real adult despite being 15 years older than her, and she yells at him, and then he gets mad and he's like, he wanted to punish her with his body again. So he like forcefully kisses her, but like she's into it, so I guess it's fine. They land on the bed and like things are getting really steamy, but Christine on the inside is like, no, we can't do this, we're not married yet. So she tells Eric to stop, and he's like, oh my god, I'm assaulting her. And it's like, yeah, you are, but she's into it, so and he starts referring to himself in the third person, which is really funny, and he's like, please don't hate Eric. Eric will apologize for the sins he committed against your body. And Christine's like, how could I hate the man I love so dearly? Sweet! And Christine's like, here's what I want, and here's what I need. I want you to make passionate love to me. What I need is for you to do that, but for us to be married first. And Eric's like, you want to get married? It's so sweet. You would willingly marry me? Oh my fucking god, I'm so lucky. And so, again, they get Nadir to officiate their marriage. They come back, they have some rockin' sex. He feels bad because he thinks he was too rough with her, but she's like, no, it was really hot. I liked it. And then later, because of reasons, there is a period of separation, of course. Basically, Christine and Eric are both led to believe that the other is dead. For 4 years, which then translates to like 20 chapters of them separate. It was torture the first time I read this. And in that amount of time, because they've had so much amazing sex, they are very kinky in this fic, I will say. They kind of roleplay, like Christine will be like, oh, who's coming to bed with me? Is it Eric or the Angel of Doom, which was like his torturer name. But anyway, because they've had so much kinky sex in the lead up to them being separated, Christine is pregnant and has a son who she names Charles after her father. And they're obviously both devastated. Eric barely has a will to live. The only thing keeping him going is Nadir at that point. And the only thing keeping Christine going is their son. But Christine goes to Paris to fulfill her promise to Eric to become a soprano. And Eric also goes to Paris. And after 4 years, he sees Christine again, and he's like, oh my fucking god, she's alive! But this is when the initially non-Eric-induced period of separation becomes an Eric-induced extending of that period of separation, because he doesn't tell her that he's alive. The reason for this being, he used to be an assassin, he used to be addicted to hashish, which is kind of what caused him to do all of his killings. The Shah's wife drugged him with hashish. He saw Christine, he choked her out, almost killing her. This is why he assumed that she was dead. So this is why they've been apart for all this time. And so he understandably feels really guilty about almost killing her. So that's why he doesn't reveal himself at first, because he's like, she probably hates me. But this is when he becomes her angel of music, who tutors her because he wants to help her repair her voice, because it is pretty damaged from when he... So he's like, until I at least repair her voice, I cannot tell her who I am. But another thing that comes in is Eric doesn't know about Charles. Christine, when she works at the opera house, finds out that there was like a dancer who got pregnant out of wedlock and was fired because of this. So she's like, oh my god, like my son was born like after Eric died and we were married, but like it's not gonna look like that to anybody, so I just better not mention Charles to anybody. So she never does, but like when Eric kind of hears about Charles, he mistakenly believes that Charles is Christine's lover. So that's annoying, but it does lead up to the incredible reveal where Eric, you know, he's like, I'm alive, I'm here, and she's like, you fucking bastard, how could you not tell me that you were alive? You heard me talking to the angel of music this whole time about how much I loved you and missed you, and he's like, I almost killed you. And I must say, my absolute favorite part of this fanfic is, of course, when Eric meets Charles for the first time, and Eric and Charles meet, and they just like fall in love immediately, and it's so cute. And also Charles sees Eric without his mask on, and he's like, does your face hurt? And Eric's like having a fucking crisis. He's like, oh my god, my 3-year-old son is seeing my facial differences right now. I'm gonna fucking die. And he's like, no, it doesn't hurt. And Charles is like, okay, do you know how to make breakfast? My sweet little baby! Alright, so now that we have covered my top 3, we will go into the bottom 3. And again, we're not doing Phantom Triumphant. Phantom's Proposal, we'll cover that last, because even though it is my favorite of the least favorites. There is a lot to talk about with that one. So we'll go over Seeing is Believing. The main thing about it for me is like it's just very long and like mostly uneventful. Not much of a strong plot to it. It was just such a slog to get through, and I've never reread it, any part of it really. But it starts off with this woman named Anna, who used to be married to a nobleman, but because she couldn't produce children, he divorced her, so now she's looking for work as a nanny. And so she becomes a nanny to 10-year-old Eric, who is living with his very neglectful, abusive mother. And Anna and Eric bond. They kind of have a surrogate mother and son relationship, but at one point Anna gets fired, and she has to go away, and she eventually meets Charles Daae. So they fall in love, but before they get married, she's like, hey, I've been married before, I can't have children, so if that's an issue for you, I totally understand. And he's like, no, I love you, I want to marry you, not like our prospective children, and we can always adopt or whatever. And Anna goes, well, actually, there's this young boy who I used to nanny, and I loved him as a son, and his mother was so cruel to him, and I always wanted to take him in. And Charles is like, you just told me that you can't have children, and yet here we are, we potentially have a child, let's go get him. But when they go back to Eric's mother's house, it turns out that Eric ran away shortly after Anna was fired, and they don't see each other for a very, very long time. However, Charles and Anna do have a child eventually, a Christine Daae, of course. And there's one day that she is sailing down the Seine because she is on her way to the opera house because she wants to get a job there, or like an apprenticeship or something. And the boat is overturned, and she hits her head, and she's going all down these canals, and then she winds up in Eric's moat underneath the opera house. And at first he thinks she's dead, but then she's not. And it turns out because she hit her head during the accident, she has lost her sight. And then the rest of the fic happens, I don't know. There is something to be said in a lot of Phantom Fan 33's works where I think a big thing for me for romance is like the story has to include something other than the romance between the two main characters for me to care about. And other fics do this tremendously well. Mystery Behind the Mask does it the best. Like what's going on with like the murder of Christine's parents and Eric's family and like all of that, and then Nadir and his love interest, like it really hits you hard. Seeing is Believing, there is like the eventual reunion of Eric and Anna when they meet again, but like that's really it. But it is this, you know, beautiful fated thing where they wanted to be mother and son, and then Eric eventually marries her daughter, so he does become Anna's son. It's very nice. Best scene, though, is after the big reunion happens. Anna sees her ex-husband, and she's like, oh, hello, let me introduce to you my daughter, Christine. He's like, your daughter? And she says, my daughter. Oh, it's so good. And he's remarried to a widow who had 2 sons, so he, like, has someone to pass off his inheritance to, but he's like, it was not her fault that we couldn't have children. I see. And Anna is also clearly like the one that got away for him, and it's like, fuck yeah, bitch. But anyway, that's all I have to say for Seeing is Believing. Let's move on to Phantom's Proposal. So this, unlike the rest of the fanfics, is a modern AU. It takes place in New York City. So Christine lives with her father, who has some sort of neurological disease. They do name it in the fanfiction, but I don't remember what it is. But it, at this point, has left him like basically paralyzed from like the neck down and nonverbal, and it's devastating. And Christine's working her ass off trying to take care of him, but you know, she ultimately can't keep up with it because she's a waitress. And one day Eric encounters her at the restaurant where she works and becomes obsessed with her immediately, and devises a way to make her his. And so he calls her into his office. He's a billionaire, by the way. He owns Phantom Industries or Enterprises or whatever the fuck. And he's like, hey, if you marry me, I will take care of you and your father for the rest of your days. Your father will have the best possible health care, blah, 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 blah. However, it's Eric, so he's kind of an asshole about this proposal. So Christine says no at first, but then Eric has already moved her father with a forged signature on Christine's part, because obviously they're not married yet, so he doesn't have any say in where her father goes, but somehow he actually does. He already moved him into a better facility, and she meets with the doctor there, and they're like clearly taking like the absolute best care of her father that anyone possibly could. So then she's like, okay, I actually do need to marry Eric in order to help my father. So she goes to Eric again, and she's like willing to talk to him now, and she actually breaks down in tears because she's like, oh my god, thank you so much for helping my dad. This is huge. Like, I thought all was lost. I thought I was going to lose him, yada yada yada. And from Eric's perspective, it's like, he could feel the reins of control back in his hands. And it's like, you know, what if we didn't get off on your future wife sobbing over her dying father? But he basically gives her this contract to sign that she doesn't read, and it's basically saying that he essentially owns her once they get married, which is fun. His reasons that he gives her for wanting to get married is that, like, it's very hard for him to date, and he wants a life companion, and he also wants children to pass his company down to. So in order to get all that done, he needs a wife. But anyway, one of the details of the contract is that if she ever cheats on him or divorces him or anything, any children that they have at that point, she loses all custody and visitation rights to them until they turn 18. And she's like, wow, you would separate your children from their mother? And he's like, well, it'd be your fault, not mine. And in the narration, it specifies that he would never actually go through with that, because if Christine were to leave him, he wouldn't be able to go on, let alone raise their children by himself. So it's like, oh, of course he would never do that. And the contract also specifies that, like, you know, if they divorce, then obviously he's not taking care of her father anymore, and his narration specifies, oh, he wouldn't go through with that anymore. He could never dream of hurting Christine in any way. But it's like, well, you are threatening her. Threats hurt. And it's not like she knows that you won't go through with it. She doesn't fucking know you. But they get married, woo. And there's just so many moments of Eric being so fucking cringe. He wants her to audition for Juilliard, and she does, and she gets in, but she's like, oh, so if I get into Juilliard, like, how much time will you allow me to go to classes and stuff? And he's like, allow? What do you think I am? You're a prison warden? How dare you accuse me of being so controlling over you as to get in the way of your school schedule? And it's like, bitch, you don't get to control every minutia of her life and then get offended when she calls you out on it. There's this other moment where, remember in Mystery Behind the Mask, where I mentioned, like, the talk that Meg and Christine have about, like, physical love and all of that? So in this story, Meg is a fellow student at Juilliard. Madame Giry is actually one of Eric's lawyers at his company. And Meg engages in a romance with Raoul, who is Christine's ex-boyfriend from high school. And Meg is like, oh, you know, I kiss him, and I just don't want to stop. And Christine's like, Meg, tell me you didn't go any further. Need I remind you, this fic takes place in the 21st century, so it's like, why shouldn't she go any further? They're both consenting adults. Like, who cares? And this gets into just an overall issue with this fic, is that despite it taking place in modern times, there's a lot about it that's very antiquated. For one thing, the dialogue. At one point, Christine sees Raoul, and Eric is, you know, being a jealous asshole, which, like, dude, she's not gonna cheat on you. If she cheats on you, her father dies. Get a grip. But anyway, Eric's being all jealous, and she's like, well, he simply wished to renew our acquaintance. She's 23 years old. 23-year-olds don't talk like that. I mean, I talked like that when I was 23, and I still do, but I'm a pretentious fuck. Christine is not. It would make perfect sense for Eric to talk like that, because they make a point that he, you know, he grew up in an orphanage in Paris, and he doesn't have a very good idea of, like, you know, a normal domestic life. He doesn't have a lot of social skills, and he is, you know, this giant billionaire figure, so he, you know, has a sense of formality surrounding a lot of things. So if he were to talk like that, it would really emphasize his otherness compared to, like, everybody else talking normal around him. So that would make sense, but instead everybody talks like that, and it just feels really out of place. And another thing regarding this era is, like, you know, one thing that I really enjoy about Phantom Fan 33's depiction of Eric and Christine's relationship is Eric's, like, overprotective, possessive nature. And so the stories that take place in, like, the 17 or 1800s, like, it makes sense for them to kind of have these, like, antiquated gender dynamics where, like, he's very much the provider and the protector, and, you know, he still views her as an equal, but, like, societally they are not equals. But then it makes absolutely no sense in a modern setting, and it's, like, especially gross because this is him at his most possessive and obsessive. Oh, there's also a really weird story beat that occurs in Phantom's proposal and also Mystery Behind the Mask. So once Christine and Eric have fallen in love, oh my god, I can't even get to it yet, hang on. One of the things in their contract is that they have to start trying for a baby like a month into their marriage, and then Eric's like, well, I'll be nice and I'll give you 2 months. Gee, thanks. Over the course of the first month or so, they do get closer emotionally, and at one point he's like, Christine, I forget the 2 months. I don't want us to have sex until you're ready. And I guess it's supposed to be this like sweet moment, but it's like, yeah, thanks. Thank you for not holding her to contractual assault, I guess. But anyway, they do fall in love later on and they have sex for the first time. And the morning after, Christine is very shy and doesn't want Eric to see her because her legs specifically are covered in the evidence of their lovemaking. You're telling me this man didn't get her a washcloth after? They just went right to sleep? And he's like, oh no, you don't have to be embarrassed. It's a symbol of a beautiful thing that occurred between us last night. And it's like, get her a washcloth! Jesus Christ. And again, in Mystery Behind the Mask, it makes more sense because she's 17 years old and very innocent and like just doesn't know that this is like perfectly normal. But in the modern fic, it's like, what does she have to be embarrassed about? She's 23, who gives a fuck? Why didn't he get her a damn washcloth? He doesn't even have like a marking fetish or anything. He just did it and forgot about it, I guess. But yeah, so that happens twice. However, I do have a couple of favorite scenes in this one, which is why it is the favorite of the bottom 3. So right after Christine and Eric get married, he takes her back to his mansion and he's giving her a tour and he shows her like the living room and he says, you know, this is where I imagine we'll spend our evenings after you come home from school and I come home from work. You know, I'll probably still be working on things, but I can do that at the desk and you can sit on the couch and read a book or watch TV. It will be the picture of domesticity. And I just love that. It's so dorky. And it does play into this theme of him, like, you know, he didn't have a normal life growing up and he just really, really wants, like, a normal domestic, like, nuclear white picket fence kind of life with Christine. There's a chapter in which Christine gets a cold and Eric flips the fuck out and makes a house call upon her, like, her father's neurologist to come and check her out, and he's like, she has a cold. It's fine. But my all-time favorite scene is they're doing exactly what Eric was describing. They're in the living room hanging out. He's working on something and she observes, because he's like sighing and huffing a lot, that she's like, oh, whatever he's working on is really stressing him out. She's watching TV, so she's like turning the volume down, trying to make herself less of a nuisance. And he's still like, like working on all of his stuff. And she's like, oh, I'm probably bothering him. I should probably leave. So she goes into the kitchen to make herself some hot chocolate and she turns around and Eric is sitting at the kitchen table with like all of his shit spread out. And she's startled and she goes, what are you doing here? And he's like, you left. You're here. Therefore, I am here. And she goes, yeah, I left because I thought I was bothering you. And he's like, no, your absence is what bothered me. I told you when I married you that I wanted a companion in life. I've lived my whole life alone, and while it's been peaceful, it's also been very lonely, and I'm done with that, so where you go, I go. And it is basically the first moment of vulnerability that we see from Eric, and Christine does appreciate it, so she offers to share her hot chocolate with him, and he accepts, even though he hates hot chocolate because he's a simp. And then there's this whole, like, oh, Eric might be part of the mob. Oh, just kidding, he's working with the FBI to get rid of the mob. Thing. I don't care. I believe that concludes the works of Phantom Fan 33. As much shit as I have talked about all of these, I have read them, particularly with my top 3, like 20 times a piece. Like they are the gift that keeps on giving. So yeah, if you made it this far in this video, just kidding, you didn't. But thank you very much for watching. I appreciate you sticking around. Bye-bye.